Hey friends, welcome back to the Urban Amish Show. My name's Patrick. I'm glad to have you here. It's been a little while since I've put out an episode, and I wanted to catch you up a little bit on what's been going on in my life and what I hope for in 2024, and perhaps what some of the things are that we can look forward to together. If you know me or have been following me on social media, you know that my family moved from our lovely home in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, moved to rural Ohio last summer, about 6 months ago, and moved into a home that I helped my dad build when I was a teenager. It is our dream home on 26 acres in beautiful Walnut Creek, Ohio, in Amish country. If you're familiar with the Amish, you know that they're a hardworking and peaceful people, and they make the best neighbors. So we are excited to be living back in my hometown. In fact, in the home that I lived in when I was a kid. We've renovated it, and I've got this library that I'm sitting in now to record this. I'm still kind of putting together my kit here. So you'll see this change if you're on the video portion of the podcast. You'll probably see my setup change as I get settled in. But it's been a busy year. 2023 was challenging, beautiful, and difficult in a lot of different ways. My son Benjamin moved out as he went to Vanderbilt College. I just recorded a podcast episode with him, which I'll get to share with you soon. He's home for the holidays, and that's been fantastic. My oldest daughter, Portia, moved out as well. She lives in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. When we decided to move back to Ohio, she thought it would be a good time for her to get an apartment in Lancaster. She's got some roommates, and she is loving the challenge of finding her path through life in Lancaster. She's surrounded by our extended family and friends back there. So we have family here in Ohio, family in Pennsylvania, and we've got a lot of friends in Nashville, Tennessee, where we lived for the past 7 years. But we're starting a new chapter in life here. And just to catch you up a little bit on what God's been doing in my life and what my story's been about for the last 6 years or so, I've shared at various places on social media and on my blog about how my life turned around when I came to an encounter with love, with Christ, and I was set free from some very destructive behaviors, which I'll get into in a little bit. But that transformation started happening in me, and I started to deconstruct some of the things that were some of the ways that I thought about the world and the belief systems that I had. Let those break apart and break down and be transformed into a new kind of person with new goals and new values, new visions for the future, and putting my life and my marriage back together and trying to be the best dad that I can be for our four lovely kids. They're ranging in age now from 21 to 14, two boys, two girls, and they are truly some of the best gifts that I have in my life. There's been a change in my job role, which has been interesting. I've been a marketer for a long time. I've been in marketing in the construction and structures industry for a very long time. And I've kind of made a sideways move into a people and culture role. So I'm working in leadership development, culture building, values teaching, all of that. So it's been a good shift. It's early, but I think it's aligning me more to what I want to be doing in this new phase of my life. I've enjoyed marketing. I've always I've enjoyed storytelling, figuring out what moves the needle on getting people to take action. And I think I've kind of followed that curiosity more deeply into figuring out what causes people to transform and change. And I've been an observer in my own journey, and that's what I want to share with you as we talk on this podcast is what does it take to change? If you're stuck in a rut and if your life isn't the way that you want it to be, what can you do to change that? What are the mindset shifts, or what's the journey to the new life that you seek and that you desire? I'm hoping that we can uncover some of that. The only thing that I can really do is tell you what I have learned as I have gone through the past 6 years. It has been a terrible and beautiful struggle to transform into the person that God made me to be. And I'm not done, nowhere near done. We're going to talk about some of that today. Um, One of the things that has been really good for me is grounding myself back in the community that I came from. So I was gone for 20 years. I left here with kind of a chip on my shoulder. I grew up in a beachy Amish church, a very religious setting, and deeply shaped the way that I saw myself, saw my relationship to God, saw my relationship to other people and the wider culture and my role. And I left here not appreciating much about that and wanting to shake the dust of this place off of my feet. And I would say I did that for 20 years. Coming back here at this juncture in my life, I'm 47 years old. My 4 kids are becoming adults. They're wonderful human beings that I'm so proud of. My lovely wife has stuck with me through the most challenging times in our marriage. And after 22 years, we're still in love. We are deeper in love now than we've ever been. And now we get to be here in my home community, being the new kinds of people that we are becoming. So that's been interesting. And what I'm learning through that, I hope to get to share here. It's been fascinating to learn what I can learn from my Amish neighbors. You know, the Amish people kind of keep to themselves. They're pretty quiet. They don't want to be made an example of. They don't want to think that they have something to teach anyone. That's not the point of them being Amish. They are Amish because by and large they believe that that is a way to live that sets them up for flourishing and a peaceful home and a peaceful life in the way that they believe that God created them to be. And that those patterns of living are patterns that help them orient themselves in that way, and that they eliminate a lot of the destructive and distracting things in the world that causes the wider culture to fracture and to fray and to come apart at the seams. And they're not wrong about a lot of that. I don't agree. I don't necessarily want to adopt all of the patterns that they have, but I have a new appreciation for many of the things that they have held onto and to their thoughtful perspective on technology. Their default answer for new technology is no. Then, over time, if it looks like a new technology could be beneficial, they may allow that in. An example of that recently is some of the communities, some of the churches close to us recently allowed battery-powered bikes as an additional form of transportation among the old order Amish. So as this community has gotten bigger geographically, the Amish communities tend to grow. The Amish people as a whole, that population grows faster than most because they have big families and they don't leave the Amish very often. So there is a tremendous growth curve in the Amish population that's unmatched in a lot of Western culture. So this community has grown geographically. It's become more widespread, far-flung. Things are further apart. Families are further apart. And we live in a pretty hilly part of Ohio. So getting somewhere with just a horse and buggy or just a bicycle is challenging, and it kind of limits some of the opportunities that they have. So recently they made the decision that they're going to allow the battery-powered bicycles to extend the range of where they might travel. Now, I don't know if allowing the battery-powered bikes is ultimately going to turn out to be a good thing for them or not. That's not for me to decide, but they, after some time and reflection, did allow that new piece of technology in. They also, by and large, allow some interaction with cell phones. Not smartphones necessarily, but use of cell phones has grown over the years. When I was a kid, the Amish didn't have telephones of any kind in their homes. Most of them had some kind of a payphone or a remotely installed telephone at the end of the lane in a little phone shack or something of that equivalent. They would go out there and make their phone calls if they needed to. But many Amish people now have a cell phone that they keep in the house or on their person. Not a lot of smartphones, but mostly cell phones, some smartphones. But that, I think that the bringing cell phones or smartphones into the Amish experience, I think definitely will change it, because there you have the internet in your pocket. You have an endless stream of entertainment and amusement and distraction. And that is really at odds with what I see as the fundamental things that the Amish stand for. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. But I've been thinking about that more because I'm more sympathetic to that point of view now than I ever have been, because of the place that we're at in our culture when it comes to technology. We have just had the default position that everything new is good, and that as it comes along that we should adopt it without question. For example, social media. I don't think that we can say that social media has been an unbridled good or an overall positive thing for our culture. I think that it has its benefits, but it has its costs too. And I don't think we've really studied those costs or really considered them all that seriously. The Amish are pretty good about thinking about the costs of adopting a new technology before they say yes. One of the things that I think we're going to have this conversation about is as it relates to AI. What is the role for AI? And more importantly, as we develop implantable computers, what is the role for merging with the machine, for implanting computers in our bodies, and particularly computers that are connected to this, what will be a ubiquitous intelligence. So if you have a chip planted into your brain, as Elon Musk is working on with Neuralink, and that chip will be connected to the cloud, and that cloud will have some advanced form of ChatGPT available to it. Not only the language models, but also visual models. So being able to have your brain kind of augmented with AI in a physical way. My kids are definitely going to have to make a decision about whether they're going to do that. I might actually have to make a decision in my lifetime about whether I'm going to do that. I've already decided I'm not. But that puts me at a tremendous disadvantage in some ways to people who will do that, because the people who will do that, who will merge with the machine and the intelligence in that way, are going to be much more technologically advanced and more powerful in a lot of different ways than what I am if I am a Luddite and I refuse to merge with the machine. My Amish forefathers made the decision 100 years ago or so that they just drew a line in the sand and said, that's about all the new technology for us. Thank you very much. We're good. And that's kind of where they stayed for the most part. Like I said, they do allow new technologies in with time, but the default answer is no. We haven't taken that position in the Western culture. We have defaulted to yes, and we've just opened the gates and let everything in, and come what may. The sexual revolution, birth control, no-fault divorce, any of these cultural changes, we just let them in. We don't really think about it that much. It's like, oh, this is great. And it allows my immediate pleasures to be gratified and my immediate desires and wants to be met, and so it must be good. But we don't look down the road a generation to see what the downstream effects of that are. So now we're dealing with a negative birth rate and the very thing that we most fundamentally need to be doing, which is perpetuating the species. We're not even that concerned about it. We want to have sex because it's fun, but we don't want to have the responsibility of having kids. So, we've got the technology to avoid that. So life is good. I get to do what I want, and I don't have to have the responsibilities. But you don't really think about the fact that you're not able to extend that behavior out into the culture over multiple generations, because if you do, we die as a species. We cease to exist. And if that seems like a good idea to you, I would submit to you that perhaps your values and alignment are not aimed towards the highest and best good if you think that it would be a good thing for our species to be diminished and to go away and cease to exist. I, for one, don't think that's a good idea. I'm all about human flourishing. Human flourishing includes a positive birth rate, and that's something that most Western cultures don't have. My Amish friends do, however, have a positive birth rate, and they are better off for it. They have families that are held together by tradition and practice and hard work and commitment. They have a very specific values hierarchy. And when you live here, you see it without question. It's very different from what's out there in the world. They value God, then they value their families, then they value work. Everything else comes after those three things: God, family, and work. And that's seen in the way that they live day in and day out. It's what's fascinating is the way that it's shaped the psyche of the people who are in the culture. Being in business in this community is really fascinating because it gives you have some advantages and some disadvantages. But one of the built-in advantages are that commitment to work, and that work ethic is so deep. If someone is lazy and doesn't contribute, they stick out like a sore thumb, and they are pushed out of the culture in some way, or they stand out as someone who cannot be depended upon. One of the local businesses that I won't name, they studied this, and they used a tool called StrengthsFinder. I have the Gallup StrengthsFinder book on my shelf here. And oh yes, I need to pull it down and go through it again. But it's an assessment of one's strengths that you can take. There's an online test, and you can take this assessment and see where your strengths lie. And I think it evaluates your strengths along 32 or 35 different dimensions, and it describes your top 5 and top 10 strengths, and then it gives you some insight into what you might do to act on those strengths rather than wrestle with your weaknesses. And what was fascinating is they divide those strengths up into different categories: communication, responsibility. I forget what all the categories are, but the responsibility-oriented gifts and strengths, things like execution, dedication, commitment to getting things done. Those responsibility-oriented strengths in the broader culture, everybody that Gallup has the data on, in those top 5 of 35 strengths, about 1 in 5 people have a responsibility strength in their top 5. I'll say that again. So 1 out of 5 people in the wider culture have in their top 5 strengths something related to responsibility. So that's conscientiousness, it's getting stuff done, it's the commitment to doing what you say you're going to do, and all of that. In our community here, 4 out of 5 have responsibility in their top 5. So a move from 20% to 80% have responsibility as one of their top 5 strengths. So you can imagine what that means for businesses. A lot of the tools that are built for business are too dumb to work well in the Amish community. If you have software and tools and systems and processes, they're built for a lot of those tools that are available on the market are built for the lowest common denominator, or what's available, what the workforce is like in the wider culture, which is 1 out of 5 people have responsibility as their top 5 strengths. So they have to be much more explicit and very, they have to dumb down the processes in some sense to account for the fact that only 1 in 5 has these responsibility-oriented gifts and strengths. Where here, if you use those tools and those processes that are set at the level of responsibility that the wider culture has, the people here get bored and they mutiny because they're not going to live that way. They have built into them this deep sense of commitment to doing the right thing. And it's fascinating to see that, how, of course, it comes from a Swiss German background for the most part. So you have that ethic, but it's also built over time, generation by generation. And I'm fascinated by what is necessary to pass along those values to the next generation if you decide not to participate in the actual explicit Amish lifestyle. Like, if I'm not living that actual form, are there ways that I can live my life and make my values explicit enough so that I can pass them on and pass along what is ultimately turns out to be, these strengths are at a genetic level. The Gallup StrengthsFinder, it's polling you for strengths that are intrinsic to you. And so it's not that it it changes people. And I'm a product of this culture. I was born and raised here, and I don't have responsibility in my top five. I'm actually one of the one. I'm part of the 20% in this community that it does not. I'm more creative. I'm focused on relationships and pattern recognition and activation and future thinking and all of that. Like that's much more my gifting. So I'm in the minority here where responsibility and conscientiousness and all of that isn't in my top five strengths at all. So it's interesting for me to look at that and go, well, I see the gifts that come from being in a culture that does what they, say they're going to do, that keeps their word. And it's fascinating. It just takes so much of the friction out of business, because when you're doing business with somebody, you don't really have to think about whether somebody's going to do what they said they're going to do or they're going to show up. And it's fascinating in our company as we work in different communities and deal with subcontractors. The subcontractors from here, if they tell you they're going to be there a certain day at a certain time, you can set your clock to it and you can bet on it, and they're going to go do it, and they're going to do a good job, and they're not going to lie about what they did. There's an honesty component to it and all of that. And it's an unfair advantage. I mean, it's fair, of course, but it's a outsized advantage to competing in business in the wider culture, because you have lower cost of labor because people get more done per unit of time, and there's less friction in doing business. People pay their bills on time. They don't screw you over, and they don't use the court system to figure out their differences or to litigate their differences. They talk about stuff, they figure it out, and they come to an agreement and they work it out. They don't go to the courts and sue you by and large because they don't believe in it. They don't believe that that's the way to handle things. So it's been a fascinating thing for me to get reconnected to my home community and have a fresh appreciation for what has shaped me and for the values that are so prominent here. Now, there's downsides to it too, right? The things that deliver those kinds of benefits they have to also, they necessarily lower the amount of, how am I trying to say this? That the individual is at risk of getting lost in the community. Now, I think the wider Western culture has overplayed the importance of the individual's needs, wants, and desires. And they have sacrificed, the wider culture has sacrificed the communities for this story that the individual's happiness, success, and the realization of their desires is the preeminent thing that we need to chase after. And the cultures or the communities that we're in outside of this, we see that they struggle because of that. Churches are struggling, community organizations are struggling, families are coming apart, marriages are coming apart, and there's kind of this atomization and fracturing of the human individuals as a result of their communities fracturing. And you just don't see that in a community like this that's governed by these generationally deep values. So that's been cool to see and have a new appreciation for. One of the things that has been fascinating for me is, I told you how I let go of some of the things that shaped me as I left here, kind of shook the dust off my sandals, so to speak. But now to humble myself and go, you know what? I could use some of that in my life. I could use some of that discipline, some of that hard work ethic, some of that commitment to getting after it every morning at dark 30. It's been good for me to get back into that and to be forced to embody that and live that out in my own life, because that discipline has been good for me, and it has led to greater flourishing in my life. One of the cool bits of news that I wanted to share with you that relates to my story and the story of our marriage and the near failure of it, and then the healing and restoration of it, all due to my compulsive behaviors around porn and sex. That failure over the years has been a defining part of my story, and the restoration of our marriage and me putting my life back together and orienting myself properly in the world has been the defining part of the last 6 years of my life. So my kids got to see me walk through that, and they got to see me that whole journey. I was very open with them about my failures. I was very open with them about what that meant for me in my life and what I needed to do to repent and turn my life around. And they got to see that in high definition, up close and personal. And it produced that whole journey together as a family produced a beautiful harvest of this abundant love that is so evident in our family. And it's something that it's just a great example of getting something beautiful in return for the sacrifice and pain that we walked through together. And that continues to happen. We are now expecting our 5th child after 15 years of not having any additional children. So our youngest is 14. She's turning 15 in February. And in May, we're expecting our 5th child. So a 15-year gap between our youngest currently and the baby being born. But that blessing, we see it as this kind of redemptive love child that God is going to give us in a way to, I think, remind us of his mercy, remind us of the outpouring of his love and just how abundant his love is. That even as I was struggling and trying to figure out how to put my life together, he was protecting us and guiding us and bringing us together, bringing our marriage together and making us whole. And now is showing that in this very real way with the blessing of baby number 5. So if you've seen other videos of mine, you might notice that I have grown a fairly big beard since I last did a video. Not as big a beard as I had 9 years ago, which if you go back far enough on my YouTube channel, you'll find some videos there. I had quite a long beard. But when I found out that my wife was pregnant, I told her, I said, you grow a baby, I'm going to grow a beard. So I haven't shaved since my wife became pregnant, and I'm not going to shave until the baby's born. So this is a baby beard, and it's kind of getting pretty rowdy, and I'm about halfway there. So we'll see how that goes. Looking forward to the baby. We don't know if it's going to be a boy or girl. In fact, this morning we were scheduled to go to an ultrasound, and it got canceled because the ultrasound technician got sick. So we'll have to find out later. So what am I struggling with today? I am, obviously there are many things that are going well in my life. I'm living on a beautiful piece of land in a very peaceful part of the world, surrounded by the best neighbors I could ask for. My marriage is flourishing and thriving. My relationship with my children is better than I could have imagined it to be. My kids came back home for the holidays, the ones that have moved out, and it has been such a sweet, sweet experience to have them back. That's one of the things that surprised me about having grown-up kids. Nobody tells you how great it is when they come back home. I'm glad that they get to be out there in the world and experience life on their own, whether it's in college or getting out into their career and building new friends. But man, it's awesome when they come back. It's the depth of the joy that I feel is impossible to communicate to you. It's so rich. But I still have struggles. And in particular, I think my struggles, well, let me just talk about them. I've been thinking about something that C.S. Lewis said. My wife bought this book called The Weight of Glory that is a C.S. Lewis book. We have a fun tradition that every year before Christmas, when the family's together, we all go to a bookstore and we all buy a book. And that's our Christmas vacation book. So we try to minimize the amount of time that we spend on screens when we're together as a family. We do have a couple movies we like to watch traditionally, but we try not to be on our phones when we're together. And one of the ways that we try to promote other activities is we promote reading. We have always done that, promoted reading as an alternative to being distracted by video games and phones and all of that. So we buy everybody a book on Christmas Eve or the day before, and that's our Christmas vacation book. My wife bought the book The Weight of Glory by C.S. Lewis, and he says, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea, we are far too easily pleased." And that is where I find myself. I find myself aware of this tendency in my life that I am far too easily pleased. And I have this sense that I was created for more than what I'm living in this moment. And I don't mean that God has been holding out on me. What I mean is that I have been holding out on God. I have not been faithful in the pursuit of discovering my life's work. I have done things to make money, and I have had what you might consider a rather instrumental relationship with my career, where I took advantage of the opportunities that were in front of me that seemed most straightforward at the time, that would allow me to make the money that I needed to make to support my family and to maintain my status in my community. But I did not pursue faithfully what it is that I was created for. And yes, I have done that in the last 6 years by pursuing wholeness and healing in my marriage and in my family and my relationships with my children. Absolutely, that is part of what I'm here for. But there is more to it than that. I've been reading a book. So the book that I bought this year when we went Christmas shopping for books is a book by Robert Greene called Mastery. And you might know Robert Greene as the author of The 48 Laws of Power. He wrote this book called Mastery, and in the book he talks about a guy named Buckminster Fuller, who found himself, like I did, in his middle age, having pursued an expedient path through his career, making money, good money in some cases, but he did not pursue the things that were deepest and most meaningful in his heart. And Robert Greene talks about his story and how when he was in middle age and he lost his job because the company he was working for went out of business, he became despondent and suicidal, and he walked towards Lake Michigan. He was in Chicago, and he walked towards Lake Michigan, and he was going to drown himself in the lake. He thought he had good life insurance coverage, and he figured his family would be better cared for if he was no longer here. And he heard a voice come from somewhere, perhaps inside of him. And the voice said, "From now on, you need never await temporal attestation to your thought. You think the truth. You do not have the right to eliminate yourself. You do not belong to you. You belong to universe. Your significance will remain forever obscure to you, but you may assume that you are fulfilling your role if you apply yourself to converting your experiences to the highest advantage of others." Never having heard voices before, Fuller could only imagine it as something real. Stunned by these words, he turned away from the water and headed home. Robert Greene then says, "No good can ever come from deviating from the path that you were destined to follow. You will be assailed by varieties of hidden pain. Most often, you deviate because of the lure of money, of more immediate prospects of prosperity. Because this does not comply with something deep within you, your interest will lag, and eventually the money will not come so easily. You will search for other easy sources of money, moving further and further away from your path. Not seeing clearly ahead of you, you will end up in a dead-end career. Even if your material needs are met, you will feel an emptiness inside you that you will need to fill with any kind of belief system, drugs, or diversions. There is no compromise here, no way of escaping the dynamic. You will recognize how far you have deviated by the depth of your pain and frustration. You must listen to the message of this frustration, this pain, and let it guide you as clearly as Fuller's voice guided him. It is a matter of life and death. The way back requires sacrifice. You cannot have everything in the present. The road to mastery requires patience. You will have to keep your focus on 5 or 10 years down the road when you will reap the rewards of your efforts. The process of getting there, however, is full of challenges and pleasures. Make your return to the path a resolution you set for yourself, and then tell others about it. It becomes a matter of shame and embarrassment to deviate from this path. In the end, the money and success that truly last come not to those who focus on such things as goals, but rather to those who focus on mastery and fulfilling their life's task. That rings really true for me. I have been dealing with pain in my body and frustration in my spirit that isn't easily explained by my circumstances. But when I read this, I knew that that pain and that frustration was a result of doing what he talks about here, where we pursue the lure of money or more immediate prospects of prosperity. And for some reason, it's easy to be fearful about following the path that is yours because it requires you to be you. It requires you to be truthful about what you want and what you fear, what you hope for. Going back to that C.S. Lewis quote that I read a little bit ago, where we are far too easily pleased. And I can look back in my life and I can see where I tried to medicate that pain with everything. I tried to medicate it with sex, with porn, with weed, alcohol, food, distractions like social media, with shopping, with collecting, with any number of things that I tried to alleviate that deep yearning that I had and the pain and frustration that I felt at not living out what I was created to. So I am recommitting myself at this old age of 47. I have a young child on the way. There's going to be a baby here in May. And I want to be a vibrant and youthful 47-year-old dad for this little kiddo. I want to be a wise father for my older kids. And I want to find the path that was laid out for me. I want to find the gift that I have to give to the world. I'm not in a dead-end career. I feel in this book, Mastery, although I have failed my way forward, my life has been a series of failures when it comes to my career. It's just a litany of failures. And I am here now and working in a company for a man that I love and trust and for a mission that I believe in. And I get to work in a role that I find fulfilling and that aligns more now with my passions, the seeing human beings transform and grow and find meaning in life. So I am very grateful for that. And I am also aware that I have not followed the path to this point. I have not been faithful to the voice that I hear inside of me. And part of my getting back onto this podcast, getting behind the mic and talking to you about it is what I felt when I read what Buckminster Fuller heard in his voice, where the voice that he heard said, "You may assume that you are fulfilling your role if you apply yourself to converting your experiences to the highest advantage of others." That's one of the things that I know that I'm gifted at, is to observe the experiences that we have and to find language to talk about what it means to my heart and to our journey together in this adventure of life. So I'm going to be faithful to that. I am not going to set a lot of goals for this new year other than to follow that voice, that inner, still, small voice. And I'm going to use the pain that I feel in my body and the frustration that I feel in my spirit to guide me towards the thing that I need to be looking at and that I need to be talking about and that I need to be doing, that I need to be taking action on. There are some specific ways that I know I need to take action. I am not in the best shape of my life. I know that I have let my physical fitness go by the wayside over the last year. And I could make all kinds of excuses for it. But ultimately, I think it does come about as a result of not doing the thing that I feel called to do at the deepest level. And it's hard to confront that and admit to that because it's easy to, I wish that I could tell you that everything was hunky-dory. I wish that I could tell you that my life is as good as it might look from the outside. And in many ways it is. I am deeply grateful. In fact, my life is so rich and beautiful that I routinely weep with joy. So I'm not complaining, but I do believe that I have a calling to convert my experiences to something that can be of highest benefit to others. And I know that I have not always done that. In order to do that, I have to be willing to speak the truth. And speaking the truth, of course, means not to lie. And I learned 6 years ago brutally that I can never lie again. But speaking the truth is more than that. It's saying what needs to be said. And the fact of the matter is, I know that I am attuned to certain vibrations and certain stories and certain influences that I see, and I feel things deeply, and I feel when things are not as they ought to be, and I have something to say about it, and I have not been saying it. I don't know why I have avoided that, but I believe that a good bit of the pain that I feel and that I deal with on a daily basis and have for a decade, that pain comes from not saying what I need to say. So this is my healing journey, is to say what I need to say. And there's going to be fits and starts. There's going to be faltering. I'm going to say things that I regret. Sometimes it's the future is not clear, and there's no immediate way for me to understand how doing what I'm supposed to be doing is going to lead to some future outcome that I desire. It's not clear to me how I might make money or get status or benefit necessarily from doing what I'm doing, but I just have to do it. And I think that's the thing that I need to be faithful to in 2024 is stop having this instrumental relationship with my work and my career and follow this path that has been laid out for me and be honest and speak the truth in everything. Say what needs to be said, and to do so in love and being faithful to it and not putting it off. And I do believe that if I do this, that the rest of my life will start to come together. My physical fitness will grow because I am becoming the kind of person who will say what I need to say and do what I need to do, including going and exercising, including getting into the cold water when I need a cold plunge. And so my satisfaction that I desire to feel in my work, I believe that will come with time. And I have to reorient my time perspective. I am so short-term oriented. It's like I want what I want and I want it right now. I'm just like everyone else in that way. And I also see how that has made me suffer, how that has caused me to Well, to not show up in the way that I need to show up. And it's caused the people around me to suffer too because, well, here's a quote by Carl Jung. He says that the unlived lives of the parent is one of the most toxic things in a family. I butchered that quote. It's not an exact quote, but that's the idea, is that the toxicity that builds up because the parents are not willing to be honest about the life that they were called to live, that toxicity poisons a family. And I know that if I would not be honest about this and pursue that toxicity would start to leak out into my marriage and my family. My wife has already paid a great price for my unwillingness to do what I need to do. And so I don't have any clear conceptions about what that is. I don't know if that means I need to sit down and write. I don't know if that means I need to just get up behind this mic and talk. I don't know what it all means, but I know that I have to freaking pay attention and do the thing. And I have to learn to trust the still small voice inside of me. I was thinking about how when Noah built the ark, it's easy for us to think when the Bible says that God told Noah to build an ark, that he heard an audible voice. But we have to assume that Noah's experience of God was no different than ours. We have to assume that the feelings that Noah got, the sense that he got about what God wanted him to do, were in the same way that you can get a sense from God about what you're supposed to do. And I can too. And I have enough of experience with that I know that exists. About a year ago, I had an encounter with God that so deeply communicated some things to me that I needed to know about how I wanted to conduct my life. There was some answers that I got from God that were so deeply imparted to me that I could not deny them. They were just implanted into my being in a way that was experiential and that was true, and that agreeing with that knowing made me erupt in joy. I was so joyful to know what I knew. And I wasn't knowing joyful things. Like, it was things that I knew I actually needed to sacrifice, that I needed to give up. There was things that I had in my life that God revealed to me that I needed to give up, that I needed to cut away because they weren't coherent with who he had me created to be and who I wanted to be. And when I saw that and I knew that in my bones, and I stopped fighting it, I agreed with it. I literally erupted in joy. There was such a deep knowing. And I think that that's perhaps what Noah's experience of knowing that he had to build the ark. It had never rained before. It had never flooded before, but he needed to build an ark. And so the kind of knowing that it takes to work for decades to build an ark of safety for his family, for a coming cataclysm, like that kind of knowing and that kind of acting on that knowing, that's what I want in my life. And one of the things I've learned in life is that the floods do come. Cataclysms come. And what godly men do, reading the story of Noah, we can see that what it looks like to be a godly man is to build an ark of safety against the coming cataclysms. And I haven't done that. I have done parts of that, but I have not been faithful to do that in every way. And so there is a knowing that is growing in me that I need to build an ark of safety against the coming cataclysms. And I'm not speaking about any specific cataclysm. I'm not a doomsday kind of guy. I build my life and everything around me thinking that I want this to be beautiful in 1,000 years from now, and I believe it will be. So I'm not a end of the world doomsday guy. But floods come. People get sick and die, and the worst thing sometimes happens to people who don't deserve it. So I am finding myself invigorated and activated to follow that call and that path. And yet I'm not clear on what exactly that is, but frankly, just between you and I, sitting down here today and making this video felt like the next step in that process. So here we are. I want to commit to you that I will be more faithful in doing this. And I also would like for you to help me grow this thing. I want to, I want to commit to this, and I want to grow my audience, and I want to grow the podcast. And I want to practice my skills. I want to develop mastery. Here's the thing. When I read a book like Mastery, I long for a sense of mastery in my life. And I see that we live in an economic environment that is so rich that we don't really have to develop mastery. We can kind of skate by in life. We can get by and be okay. But there is an emptiness there's a void there that isn't filled by really mastering something. And I long for that. And for some reason, God has placed these longings in my heart. I want an exquisite marriage. I want a relationship with each one of my kids that brings tears to my eyes because it's so rich and so beautiful. I want my children to have exquisite marriages and families. I want to make this home that I'm in, these 26 acres, I want to make them flourish and grow and to be so beautiful that when you arrive here, you can see that there is something different happening here. I want to have the kind of intergenerational wealth that I can give my children I can pass something on to my children, an inheritance. Yes, an inheritance of faith, of course, an inheritance of godly living, yes. But I also want to have excess money to pass along to my children when I die. Not because I don't think that they can earn it on themselves. But the Bible talks about that a wise and good man gives his children houses and, I forget what it says, houses and money, houses and land, houses, something. But I'm not in a position to do that. I want to be in a position to do that. And you might say, do I want it all? Yes, I do. I do want it all. I want the kingdom of heaven to continue to expand around me. I want the relationships around me to be in harmony. I want the people around me to have well-balanced emotional and nervous systems. I want them to have good mental health. I want them to flourish physically. I want them to make contact with ultimate reality in such a way that guides them deeply. I want to see the suffering transformed into something beautiful. We can't escape suffering. That's inherent in life. But we can allow it to change into something beautiful. And that's what I want. We are far too easily pleased. I'm done dicking around with food and sex and drugs and whatever else is amusing us and distracting us and scrolling away our most precious resource that we have, our attention, into the black hole that is social media. I want us to capture a vision for what reality could be like if we began to transform it, do the hard work of becoming whole and transforming the real material bits of reality around us into something that is oriented towards the good. And we have to capture this vision that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's as close as the breath we breathe. It's as close as the words we speak. And it's not, heaven isn't merely some place we go to when we die if we believe the right information about God. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, and it's something that manifests itself in our life and in our work and in our homes and our families. And when we capture the vision for what that can be, it has to animate us into something, working towards something much higher. It's not just a instrumental relationship with the truth where we use our words to try to accomplish something, or we try to get what we want from life without going all in. It's like, no, when I believe we have to pour out our gifts and our lives for the betterment of those around us. And I believe in doing so, we will find more than what we know that we're looking for. We're so richly blessed already, and I just want to see that overflow. So that's what 2024 is about for me, and I hope that you join me in this. Would you share this podcast with somebody that you think might enjoy it? I want to grow the subscriber base to this, and also, if you would you leave a review if you like this and if this resonated with you? And follow me on Instagram if you don't. I'm at Urban Amish, urban.amish. And I'm going to continue to make videos, podcasts talking about my experience of living here among my Amish neighbors, about what I'm learning as I seek to live out this path of finding my life's task at this late stage. If you want to see a renaissance, you want to see a transformation, you want to see somebody change and grow, let's go along for the ride. Join me and let's go. I have some friends. I have a small circle of friends that are committed to this journey as well. And one of those guys is a guy named Kent Lapp, who also has a podcast. And I'm going to be releasing a few episodes of some conversations that he and I had a few weeks back, where we just did these episodes remotely via video call. So it's a little different format. He lives in Nashville. He's an executive pastor at Emmanuel Church in Nashville, has a beautiful wife and family, and they have been dear friends of ours. They have been through so much pain and failure and have come out just thriving and flourishing, and it's so fun to see, and it's shaped him in such a rich way. So watch for those episodes to drop. Like I said, I had a great conversation with my oldest son, Benjamin, this morning that I'm going to release here on the podcast as well. So watch for that. But do subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram, urban.amish. And let's go on this journey together. Let's find what we were put here for and stop diddling away our life in these little drips and drabs and digital blobs on a screen. And let's actually create something so beautiful it makes us weep with joy. I think that's what we can do when we follow this still small voice within us and we see the kingdom of heaven made manifest. Thank you, friends.